Hey, how about feeling a little bit better about your own life? Here's a series of unfortunate events. This little keyway is the crankshaft key that drives the harmonic balancer, the timing set, and the balancer set in a 2.2 Ecotech. And it looks like a regular Woodruff key, but it's got these little ears on the end, and the one side drives the timings, or the balancer timing. And then the main part drives the timing and the harmonic balancer, and then the harmonic balancer drives the serpentine belt. But this is an 03 Cavalier, and I experienced a series of very unfortunate events with the old girl. I started it after leaving the grocery store, and the engine had a terrible shake to it. So I tried a couple things, like doing a tune-up on it, and that made no difference whatsoever. And I finally came to the conclusion, with the advice of a machine shop buddy, who said, well, you know, your balancers might have jumped time. So you can't check that without partially disassembling the motor, but when you get in through here through the wheel well, you can remove the timing cover, and you can check the timing chains for both the cams and for the balancer shafts. So I pulled all this apart, and sure enough, the chain was really loose, and the tensioner was out of stroke. And yes, in fact, you could jump time on the balancer shafts, even pulling it as tight as you could get it. And so the shafts had jump time, and that's why the engine was vibrating. So in the process of removing that, I managed to shear the end of my old key off by trying to use the chain to stop the sprockets from turning. And an additional piece of bad luck, my timing set was fine. The chain and sprockets for the cam timing were absolutely fine, but the balancer timing is behind that, so you've got to remove the sprockets, which would normally be up here, and then the chain and etc. for the cam timing, in order to get to the balancer timing, which is in the rear. And if you look up there, you can see the one shaft and the other. Those are the balancer shafts, but they're timed from behind the cam chain. So then that required that I remove a lot of other stuff in the top end of the motor and remove the timing set. I figured, well, you know what, while I'm not going to just take it out and not replace it, because you know, that would be kind of stupid on my part. It's got 150,000 miles on it. If you're going to remove it, you might as well change it, right? So I bought the two kits and this dealer-only key, which I keep showing that because of just the amount of contempt I have for the little thing. Dealer-only item, I got that, and in the meanwhile, I figured, you know what, I'm waiting on some parts to come in. I ordered them and had to wait a day or so, and then had some bad weather, etc. So it kind of delayed my project. But I figured, you know what, while I'm at it, it needed rear struts. So I figured I'd start working on the rear struts while I was waiting for some of my timing stuff. And my struts came in without the boots that go over this little shaft here. And the old boots were damaged and were no good. And but I figured, you know what, it's an old car and I don't care, so I put it together. But then my conscience started to trouble me, and I thought, no, I'm not going to leave that like that. I can order the boots for the struts that I got, and it comes apart really easy. You got one bolt down here, one bolt up here, and then two bolts up here. And the whole strut comes on. I figured, well, you know what, I'm not going to leave that like that, considering how easy it is to fix. So I ordered those boots, and I was gonna put those on this morning before getting back into my timing issue over here. But see, this particular car has a problem with that key right there. That key does not actually unlock the trunk. The only way to open the trunk is to push the button at the dashboard and pop the trunk electrically. But I had disconnected the battery, of course, while working on the motor, so the battery's disconnected, and now I can't open the trunk without reconnecting the battery. So I reconnected the battery, pushed the button for the trunk, and when I pushed the button for the trunk, so I could get back in and remove my struts and put the boots on, because, hey, that's the right thing to do, right? The engine started cranking. And now why this occurred, I have no clue. But I put power back onto the system and the engine started cranking. Well, the engine cranking without having a timing chain on it is a big problem. Because I had the engine set to top dead center, meaning that the number one cylinder here, these valves are closed. But if you look over here, you can see the intake lobes on number 4 are right at the bottom, so those valves are pushed all the way out into the cylinder bore. And the car just started cranking on its own, and I am pretty sure bent those valves because I wanted to put the boots onto the struts, and the key doesn't work in the trunk and you got to do it electrically. And of course there's more to the story. I don't know why the engine cranked, but it did. And now my plan to check whether these valves are bent or not is to remove the intake manifold, which I've already done. And since I probably have to pull the head anyway, it's not wasted effort. The intake manifold would have had to come off anyway to pull the head. But I've gone ahead and pulled the head, and now my plan is to put the crankshaft at 90 degrees so where all the cylinders are halfway down, or all the pistons are halfway down. And then I'm going to roll this cam over by hand. There's a little hex over here that lets you do that. So I'm going to roll this cam over and close these intake valves. I'm going to pour a little bit of like brake clean or something like that in there and see whether that just pours right into the cylinder, which I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it's going to do. So there you go. There's my story of how everything in the world that could possibly go wrong has gone wrong. I've gone from a loose balancer shaft chain to bent valves. Oh, now I've gone ahead and clocked the engine to 90 degrees. This keyway, that's the key that I hate so much, goes in that little slot there. And when it's at the top, that's top dead center for 1 and 4. No, sorry, it's top dead center for 1 and bottom dead center for 4, I think. But anyway, at 90 degrees, they should all be somewhere between top and bottom, and so I should be able to roll the valves over without interfering with any of the piston tops. So I set it to 90 degrees there and installed the key that I hate so much. This, by the way, is what do they call this? The Rough Rider Bone Creeper, and it's actually pretty nice, except you can't get out of it. Once you're in that creeper, you're kind of captive to it. So now I'm going to roll the cam over to get these lobes to the top, and I'm going to pour some fluid into the intake port and see if it holds. So now I've positioned the camshaft such that 2 and 4 should be fully seated on the intake side, and I'm going to spray some fluid in there. It's a 24mm wrench to spin that, by the way. And while I was doing this, my wife actually sent me a Bible verse. She gets these verses of the day, and hers was Romans 8:26, which says that the Holy Spirit helps us to pray because we don't even know what we ought to pray for ourselves. And I was reminded, yeah, that Romans 8:28, I believe it is, goes on to say that all things work together for good to them that love God, who are the called according to his purpose. And right at the moment I'm having a tough time imagining how this is working together for good, but we'll see. She's blood type B positive. She goes around saying, be positive, be positive. Well, I'm pretty positive that once I get this all fixed and back together, the fuel pump's going to light the tank and the whole thing's going to burn down. So that's my version of being positive. But before I do this, I did want to point out that while I was out here working, my neighbor brought me 2 tomatoes. So if it hadn't been for this big fiasco, I would not have gotten those tomatoes at all, probably. And I had an option also on several fluids to squirt there into that intake port. So I've got brake cleaner, carb cleaner, PB blaster. I decided to use WD-40 because it says here on the can, stop squeaks, removes and protects. Removes, it says removes and protects. I don't know what it removes, but I'm assuming that would be like removes bent valves, loosens rusted parts, frees sticky mechanisms while bent valves stick, and drives out moisture. Those are all good things. So I've selected WD-40. That's less than spectacular. The light that just fell there is a little cordless Bosch LED. Very useful item. Got it on Amazon. This is just not impressing me yet. Okay, maybe I'm gonna... I may change my mind and go with PB Blaster, carb cleaner, or I might go ahead and just light the tank myself. We'll see. Maybe you're wondering why I don't just get a better car or hire somebody else to do it, and the answer to that is because I'm a triathlete and I don't have any money left. Triathlon's more expensive than a crack habit. Let's try some PB Blaster. Oh yeah, that's going right in there. Now the question is it staying on top of the valves or pouring right into the cylinder? Believe it or not, that is sitting right on top of those valves. So I can't really hold the light and everything all at once, so I'm going to go ahead and spray some into 2 and 4, as I was saying. Fill that up some. If you can tell what's going on there or not. There, that's not a bad angle. See how that PB Blaster is sitting right on top of those valves and it is not leaking into the engine? If those valves were bent, it would be leaking in right now. And then there's 2, same thing. So now I'm going to roll this cam about 180. 24mm wrench. And I've got 1 at the top and 3 at the side. I might back this up 1. Yeah, that's not bad. That's got the lobes pointed this way, and then, I don't know, like 11 o'clock there. I'm going to repeat it. That looks good. That looks good. I have no idea how this did not bend those number 4 cylinder intake valves. They were all the way extended, or virtually all the way extended. And the engine seemed to have cranked over probably 3 full revolutions. But maybe it didn't. Like I say, I was only connecting the battery for the purpose of energizing the trunk latch release, and I didn't really tighten the screw. It didn't make good connection. Maybe the starter motor really didn't have the power to turn over, and it was just making noise as it attempted to. I don't know. But I'm redoing this test on number 4 because, oh, there we go. I think maybe it is leaking. It sure is. It's leaking. That valve there on the left is leaking right down. Oddly enough, the one on the right really isn't. But it wasn't leaking all that fast. Not as fast as I would have expected. Quick recap. So, one, do it right the first time so you don't have to go back and do it again. And if I'd put the boot on there in the first place, I wouldn't have found myself wanting to tear it all back apart and redo it. And of course, this all went sideways on me because I put the battery cable back on to pop the trunk, and then the engine cranked, bent the valves. I did manage to get one of my triathlon stickers into the shot in a previous frame. It was this one over here, the Swim Bike Run. But I missed this one over here, which is my 140.6. That's an Ironman, which I've done. And then I only bring that up mainly because I wanted to point out regarding this creeper, it is about the same difficulty to complete an Ironman as it is to get out of this Rough Rider creeper. So very, very comfortable, very useful creeper, very hard to get out of. And then there's the cylinder head gone missing off to the machine shop. It's not terribly difficult to remove, fortunately, but I'm super bummed that I bent those valves. Real fluke, real bummer. And now the missus has actually just come home. The Sherpa, she's here. We're gonna go meet the Sherpa bike rack triathlete, as I mentioned. Sherpa.
Hi.
Say be positive.
Be positive.
Ah, shut up. So here's the conclusion. The reality is that those valves did get bent, and I've already pulled the head. I've taken it to the machine shop. Here's my tomatoes that the neighbor brought, and I've decided to make BLTs.